There's several things in my life that I've never really wanted to know about. One of those is cars, and one is construction. And many years ago, I was the regional youth minister for the Christian Church Disciples of Christ, one of the best jobs in the world, I have to say. And we were going to go on a work camp to Yakima, Washington. So we took 3 cars, and this is before the number of cell phones that are in everybody's life. So we had CB radios. So I was Red Rev, and I was with Karen, and we were headed to Yakima. We had made plans to stop at churches and spend the night there. We had 15 teenagers with us for this 3-week adventure. And as we headed to Yakima, and the first church we stopped at was in Las Vegas, and most of the kids had never been to Las Vegas, and to see the Strip was pretty incredible for them. Even the McDonald's on the Strip was pretty incredible. And we just had a great journey. Ginger Showalter was my navigator. She had the maps. We only got lost once, which is pretty good for going from Tucson, Arizona to Yakima, Washington. And we just kind of stayed together. And if we had any problems, we would be on the CB with each other. So as you think about what that means with a number of kids, and we thought we were going to get up there and do some painting. Well, when we got up there, they actually wanted us to help construct an outdoor bathhouse. I looked at the blueprints, mind you, blueprints. Luckily, one of the young men with us, his dad was in construction, and he could read those blueprints. Thank goodness. Otherwise, it would have been an incredible disaster. But we worked on that bathhouse for 5 days, and were able to get that in. They had the basic frame there and the floor and everything. So they had to put in the toilet and the sinks and those kinds of things, and some other stuff. But it was quite an adventure. We did do some painting while we were there. And the people in the church that was there were absolutely fabulous. They brought us cases of peaches. They brought us other fresh fruits and vegetables. So we cooked there in the kitchen, and then we slept in their fellowship hall. Well, on our last night there, we knew that it was going to be a long haul to come back from Washington to Tucson, Arizona. And so I wanted the kids to go to sleep relatively early. They decided they were going to play the game Truth or Dare. If you don't know anything about Truth or Dare, it's something that you never want your kids to be involved in. Basically, what they do is they ask you a question, and you either have to tell the truth, or if you don't want to answer, then you have to do a dare. So they had been playing this for a while, and 2 of the boys, Bruce and Cliff, did not want to answer truthfully, so they accepted the dare. One of them was supposed to streak out in front of the church, and the other one was supposed to flash the first car that came by. So they went out front. Now, myself and Karen were asleep. They went out front of the church, and the first car that went by, and one streaked, one flashed, was a police car. Tribal police, which is a different entity all of its own. When they realized, when the flashing red lights came off, they both took up running behind the church. Well, right behind the church was a tomato field that had just been irrigated. So Bruce went into the tomato field, pretty much slid in the tomato field. And they caught both Cliff and Bruce. And then they came into the church. And one of the kids came and said, "Bonnie, there's a man here who wants to see you." Well, back then I was a lot younger, a lot thinner, a lot cuter. And I looked up, and probably the largest man I'd seen in a very long time was standing in the door with a badge on. So I got up, I went outside with him, and he said, "Ma'am, we've arrested 2 of your boys for indecent exposure and endangerment." And the bail is going to be $1,500 a piece. Well, what ran through my mind was, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to call Arizona and say, I need $3,000 cash to bail out two of our youth kids. I didn't think that was a good idea. So I'm going, my dad was a police officer. I understand. I know what it means for them to have done this. I am so sorry. I'm just going on and on and on. In the meantime, one of the other officers, because there was 3 officers there, one of the other officers brought up Bruce, and I thought he had his hands behind his back. I didn't realize that he was handcuffed. Well, when the officer showed his flashlight on him, and he was covered with mud, and his shorts were on backwards because he had taken his shorts off, and as he was running, he was trying to put his shorts back on and didn't realize he had them on backwards. So here he is, covered with mud, shorts on backwards, hands handcuffed behind his back, and I'm thinking, oh dear Lord in heaven, how am I going to explain this to their parents? So the officer says they had left Cliff in the back of the squad car. So he says, well, I'm going to go get your other young man out. And he says, I'll take the handcuffs off of him right now. And I went, handcuffs? He's handcuffed? I went, oh my gosh. So I kept talking to him and I said, I am so grateful. I said, we're planning on leaving tomorrow morning. As we're going back home, we're heading down the coast of California. We're doing a number of things on our way. And so he said, well, I'll release them in your custody. I was ever so grateful. So I'm standing there continuing to talk to him as the other officer is over in the squad car to get Cliff out of the car and to let him get back into the church. So as I'm talking to him, he had on a microphone up on his collar, like they often do. And the other officer said, are you still talking to the lady in charge? And the officer I was talking to said, yes, I am. Well, the other officer said, well, would you ask her if she'd like to go out for a cup of coffee? And I looked at the officer I was talking to, and he goes, are you embarrassed? And I said, you've just arrested 2 of my boys on a mission trip for indecent exposure. No, that's not going to embarrass me. So they did release the boys to my custody. I told them to go on back into the church and to go get cleaned up. And I continued to talk to the officers and told them how grateful I was to have them not arrest the boys, to let them be released to me, and that I was sure going to be a great learning experience for them. So the officers left. And of course, the kids are thinking, oh my gosh, we're dead. We are just dead meat. So when I went into the church, dead silence. Nobody is saying anything. So I looked at the kids, because by now almost everybody is awake, of course, because they're going, oh my gosh, how they whisper to each other, Bonnie's outside with police officers, Cliff and Bruce has been arrested. And so they're really quiet. So I looked at all of them. I said, okay, everybody go to sleep. We're not going to talk about anything right now. We'll talk about it in the morning. So the next morning when we got up, and I said to the boys, I said, we're going to have to call your parents. Well, before we had left on this trip, of course, we'd had a huge parent meeting. And I told the parents that if anything went wrong, that I would have to call them and they would have to pick their boys up at the airport or their kids up at the airport. And so they were like, do we have to call our parents? And I said, we have to call your parents. Guys, you were arrested for all intents and purposes. It was only by the grace of the Lord that you're not in jail, and I'm not calling your parents for bail money. So I went in with them, and they called home, and one of the boys, his mom answered the phone, and one of the boys said, Mom, I'm in a little trouble. And I looked at him, and I went, a little trouble? So she's going, what happened? And he says, well, I got picked up by an officer. And so I took the phone and I said to her, I'm sorry, the boys were playing a game, and I explained the situation, what had happened, that the officers didn't ultimately arrest them, that he had released them back into my custody. And the mom says, are they at the airport? And I said, no, I'm going to keep them with us, because my thought is that I was going to have more influence over those boys on the trip home than I'd ever had on those boys. And so they both told their parents what had happened, And I said, they understand the severity of what could have occurred and what a really not bright decision they had made to do that. And so I kept them. Well, on the way home, we stopped in San Francisco and we were staying at Karen's mom's house. So we all went in, and of course, the topic of conversation is all what had happened, all those things. So we got to tour San Francisco as one of the uh, perks that we had after them working in Yakima to build this, because we were stopping in San Francisco, and then we were going to stop at Disneyland, and then we were going to stop at SeaWorld before we came back home to Tucson. So after we'd left San Francisco, we went to Disneyland. And as we all get out of the car, of course, you give all of the things that you're going to say to the kids, what you can do, what you can't do, that one of us would be in the center at the park there in the middle of Disneyland every hour at the top of the hour if they needed anything, all of that stuff. Well, Chris Mason, bless his heart, he was one of the boys with us, one of the leaders of the group. And I said, guys, I expect excellent behavior while we're here. No trouble. You're not going to do anything that would really not be a wise decision. You're going to continue to do good things. And so Chris looked at the boys and he goes, yes, Bonnie's not into dating the 7 dwarfs. So we had a great time. Obviously, no trouble at Disneyland at all. And the kids really enjoyed it. We stayed at Chapman University. At that time, it was Chapman College for the night, which was also a good adventure for them because they got to see our related college. It was a Disciples of Christ related college. And then we went on to SeaWorld, and then we headed home to Tucson. Well, of course, when we got to Tucson and all the kids got picked up and went home, we were going to have the next week a fellowship dinner with the congregation. And we had taken pictures, obviously, along the way, and we'd made a slideshow and all of that. And one of the slides, I had taken this beautiful moon that was over Washington while we were there. And it was one of the last slides that we had in the slideshow. And as we were doing the commentary of what we had been doing there and all the adventures that we had had, I had that as one of the last slides. And I said, this was the moon over Washington. And of course, I wasn't thinking about what that meant. Those of you that know me, I don't get those kind of innuendo kind of things. When I said moon over Washington, of course, everybody breaks up laughing because one of the boys had mooned the police car. So it was a great adventure. It was memorable, and I think the kids probably will remember that trip for a very long time. If any of you are listening who are on that trip and you can think of any of the things that I forgot, and email me at bonnie.pegs@outlook.com. And next time I do a show, I'll tag in the things that I forgot about that trip. It really was a phenomenal time. We're going to be together. I'm going to broadcast every single day and remind you of some of the stories through my life and also talk about some of the things that can make our lives different and blessed. I've enjoyed being with you. I hope you'll join me again. And this is Bonnie Peg saying, have a blessed day.